The train lurched to a stop at the Watsonville depot in California, and Sarah Mitchell pressed her wire-rimmed spectacles higher on her nose, peering through the dusty window at the weathered planks of the platform where her future waited somewhere beyond the haze of coal smoke and summer heat. It was June of 1882, and Sarah had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Pennsylvania with nothing but a battered trunk, her late mother's pearl brooch, and a series of carefully penned letters from a man named Kenneth Edwards, who owned a cattle ranch outside town and needed a wife. She had answered his advertisement in the Philadelphia newspaper 3 months ago, driven by desperation after her father's gambling debts had left her with nothing and unwanted attention from creditors who suggested unsavory solutions to her predicament. The conductor helped her down onto the platform, and Sarah stood there with her trunk at her feet, smoothing the wrinkles from her best traveling dress, a modest blue calico that had seen better days but was clean and pressed. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her spectacles again, a nervous habit she had developed in childhood. Without them, the world was nothing but colorful blurs, and she needed to see clearly today of all days. Men and women bustled past her, reuniting with loved ones or hurrying about their business. Sarah felt suddenly alone in a way she had not experienced even during the long train journey. At least then, she had been moving toward something. Now she was here, and the something needed to materialize into reality. She spotted several men standing at various points along the platform, each scanning the disembarking passengers with varying degrees of interest. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Which one was Kenneth Edwards? His letters had been kind, describing his ranch and his hopes for a family. But he had never sent a photograph, and she had been too embarrassed to request one after failing to send her own. A tall figure separated himself from the shadow of the depot building, and Sarah's breath caught. He was broad-shouldered and lean in that particular way of men who worked with their bodies every day, wearing denim trousers, a worn leather vest over a cream-colored shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. Boots dusty from riding, a bandana tied loosely around his neck. Everything about him proclaimed cowboy, and as he walked closer, she could see he was perhaps in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and a cautious expression. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes moving from her face to the trunk and back again. "Miss Mitchell." His voice was deeper than she had imagined, with a rough edge that suggested a man not accustomed to lengthy conversations. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks and offered what she hoped was a friendly smile, though her lips quivered with nervousness. "Yes, Mr. Edwards, Kenneth. Just Kenneth." He stepped closer, and she could see his eyes now, a surprising gray-blue like storm clouds over mountains. He was studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she held his gaze. Then his expression shifted, softened somehow, and the corners of his mouth lifted just slightly. "I see you clearly." The words were simple, but something in the way he said them made Sarah's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. She realized with a start that he meant the spectacles, that he was acknowledging them without mockery or pity. All her life, she had been poor Sarah with the weak eyes, pitied by some, mocked by others. Men had called her plain, bookish, too serious. But Kenneth was looking at her like she was exactly what he had hoped to find. "I should have mentioned them in my letters," she said quietly, her smile becoming more genuine. "I cannot see well without them. Some find them unattractive." "They frame your eyes nicely," Kenneth said, and then seemed surprised by his own words as if he had not planned to speak them aloud. He cleared his throat and reached for her trunk. "Wagon's just over here. It is about an hour's ride to the ranch. I hope the journey was not too difficult." "It was long," Sarah admitted, falling into step beside him as he carried her trunk with easy strength. "But I am grateful to be here." He loaded the trunk into the back of a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses, then helped her up onto the seat with a gentle hand at her elbow. The contact was brief, but sent awareness skittering through her. This man was to be her husband. The thought was both terrifying and oddly thrilling. As Kenneth guided the horses out of town, Sarah watched the landscape unfold around them. Watsonville sat in a fertile valley, with rolling hills covered in golden grass and clusters of oak trees. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer warmth. Farms and ranches dotted the valley, and she could see cattle grazing peacefully in the afternoon sun. "It is beautiful here," she said softly. "It is," Kenneth agreed. "Different from Pennsylvania, I expect. Very different, greener there, more humid. This feels open, like the sky goes on forever." "That is what I love about it," he said, and she heard genuine feeling in his voice. "Came out here 5 years ago with my brother. We built the ranch together, bought cattle with every penny we could scrape up. It was hard work, but good work." Sarah noticed his use of past tense. "Your brother, is he still at the ranch?" Kenneth's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Daniel died 2 years ago. Horse threw him, broke his neck. It was quick." "I am so sorry," Sarah said, and meant it. She understood loss. Her mother had passed 3 years ago. Her father just 6 months past, though his death from a heart seizure had been more relief than grief after years of watching him destroy everything they had. "He was a good man. Would have liked you, I think." Kenneth glanced at her. "He always said I needed someone sensible, someone with a level head. Said cowboys could be fools about women, going for pretty faces without thinking about what makes a real partner." "And you think I am sensible?" Sarah asked, not sure whether to be flattered or disappointed at such a pragmatic assessment. "I think," Kenneth said carefully, "that your letters showed intelligence and honesty. You did not paint yourself as something you are not. You wrote about your circumstances plainly, about what you could bring to a marriage. That takes courage." "I had little choice," Sarah said, then immediately wished she could take the words back. They sounded bitter, but Kenneth nodded. "I know something about having little choice. The ranch needs a woman's touch, needs a family. I could manage alone, but that is just existing, not living. I want more than that. Figured maybe you did too." "I do," Sarah said, and found she meant it completely. "I want a home, a real home. I want to be useful, to belong somewhere." "Then we want the same things," Kenneth said. "That is a good start." They rode in companionable silence for a while, and Sarah found herself stealing glances at her future husband. His hands on the reins were strong and capable, with old scars marking his knuckles. His profile was handsome in a rugged way, with a straight nose and a strong jaw covered in a few days' worth of dark stubble. When he concentrated on the road ahead, a small line appeared between his brows. "Tell me about the ranch," she said, wanting to know more, wanting to fill the silence with something other than her own nervous thoughts. Kenneth's expression brightened noticeably. 300 acres of good grazing land. The house is not fancy, but it is solid. 2 bedrooms, a main room with a fireplace, a kitchen. I have been sleeping in the bunkhouse since Daniel passed, giving you the house to yourself until we marry proper." "When did you plan for the wedding?" Sarah asked, her heart rate picking up again. "Thought we would see how you feel after a few days," Kenneth said. "Pastor Donnelly can marry us whenever you are ready. No rush if you need time to be certain." The consideration in his words touched her. "That is kind of you." "It is practical," Kenneth countered. "You should be sure." "Marriage is permanent, Miss Mitchell. I want you to be comfortable with your choice. Please call me Sarah." "Sarah," he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice. "I am not a man of many words, Sarah. but I will tell you straight what I can offer. Hard work, honesty, and respect. I will never raise a hand to you, never treat you as less than a partner. What is mine will be yours, and I expect to build something lasting together." "That is more than many women get," Sarah said quietly. "I will offer you the same in return. I am a hard worker, a decent cook, and I can read and figure numbers. I can help with the ranch records if you need it. Daniel handled most of that, and I have been muddling through since he died," Kenneth admitted. "I would be grateful for help with the books. Numbers were never my strength." The admission made Sarah smile. Here was something concrete she could contribute immediately. "Then I will gladly help." The ranch came into view as they crested a gentle rise. It was situated in a small valley with a stream running through it, the water glinting silver in the sunlight. The house was indeed simple but appeared well built, a one-story structure with a covered porch and a stone chimney. A barn stood nearby, along with a stable, a chicken coop, and what looked like a bunkhouse. Fences marked off various paddocks, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. "It is wonderful," Sarah breathed and meant it. This place had a feeling of permanence, of roots sinking deep into good earth. Kenneth pulled the wagon up to the house, and a man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his trousers. He was younger than Kenneth, perhaps 20 or so, with sandy hair and a friendly, open face. "Tommy," Kenneth called, "come meet Sarah." The young man approached with a wide grin. "Miss Mitchell, pleased to make your acquaintance." "Kenneth has been nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs waiting for you to arrive." "Tommy works for me," Kenneth said with exasperation, though Sarah could see affection beneath the gruff tone. "He also talks too much." "Someone has to around here," Tommy shot back cheerfully. He tipped his hat to Sarah. "Welcome to the ranch, miss. It will be mighty nice to have a woman around the place. Maybe someone will finally convince Kenneth to fix that leak in the barn roof." "There is no leak in the barn roof," Kenneth protested. "There will become winter if you do not patch those weak spots," Tommy said. He winked at Sarah. "See what I have to work with." Despite her nervousness, Sarah found herself smiling at their banter. It reminded her of her own relationship with her younger cousins, before everything had fallen apart back home. Kenneth helped her down from the wagon, his hands spanning her waist easily. For a moment they stood close together, and Sarah was acutely aware of his height, the warmth of him, the faint scent of leather and horses and sunshine. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "Let me show you the house," he said. Inside, the house was neat but clearly lacked a woman's presence. The main room held a sofa and 2 chairs arranged around a large stone fireplace, with a table and 4 chairs near the kitchen area. Everything was clean but sparse, functional without being homey. The kitchen had a good stove, a dry sink, and shelves for dishes and supplies. "The bedroom is through here," Kenneth said, leading her to a door off the main room. "I put fresh linens on the bed yesterday, and Tommy's wife Margaret came by to help me clean everything properly." "Tommy is married?" Sarah asked, surprised. 6 months now. They have a small place a few miles east. Margaret has been very excited about you coming, says she is desperate for female company. I expect she will be by soon to introduce herself. The bedroom was small but pleasant, with a double bed covered in a simple quilt, a wardrobe, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and a window that looked out toward the stream. Sarah set her small traveling bag on the bed, feeling suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of her situation. "The other bedroom was Daniel's," Kenneth said quietly. "I have not changed it much. You can use it for whatever you like." "What about you?" Sarah asked. "Where will you sleep until we marry?" "Bunkhouse, like I said. It is comfortable enough." Sarah turned to face him. Kenneth, I appreciate your consideration, truly, but I came here to marry you. I do not need weeks to decide. I knew what I was choosing when I boarded that train. He studied her with those storm cloud eyes. You are certain? I am, unless you are not certain about me. I am certain, he said immediately. From your first letter I felt certain, but I did not want to rush you, did not want you to feel trapped. Then let us speak to the pastor, Sarah said, surprised by her own boldness. I would marry you this Sunday if he can arrange it. Something like relief washed over Kenneth's features. Sunday it is then. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Margaret did indeed arrive the very next morning, a plump, cheerful woman with dark curls and an infectious laugh. She was perhaps Sarah's age, 24 or 25, and she embraced Sarah like they were already friends. Thank heavens you are here, Margaret declared. I have been the only woman for miles, and while I love Tommy dearly, a girl needs female conversation. Men simply do not understand the importance of a proper discussion about anything other than cattle and weather. Sarah found herself laughing, tension she had not realized she carried melting away. I am very glad to meet you. Kenneth has been beside himself, Margaret confided as they sat on the porch with lemonade. Tommy says he has never seen his boss so worked up about anything. He wore a path in the ground pacing while waiting for your telegram about which train you would be on. He seems very composed, Sarah said. He is good at hiding his feelings, Margaret agreed. But they run deep. He loved his brother something fierce, nearly destroyed him when Daniel died. This ranch was their dream together, and Kenneth has been lost without him. He needs someone to care about again, someone to build a future with. I hope I can be that for him, Sarah said softly. Margaret reached over and squeezed her hand. I can see you care already. That is good. Kenneth is a fine man, Sarah. He will treat you right. Over the following days, Sarah explored her new home and began making small changes. She picked wildflowers and arranged them in jars on the table and windowsills. She rearranged the kitchen to be more efficient, taking inventory of supplies and making lists of what was needed. She found Daniel's record books and spent an evening reviewing them, her mind already working on better systems for tracking expenses and profits. Kenneth was gone most of each day, working with the cattle and repairing fences, but he came in for supper each evening. Sarah cooked the meals she knew best, and they ate together at the table, their conversations gradually growing easier and more natural. You are good with the books, Kenneth said one evening, reviewing the new ledger she had started. This makes much more sense than what I was doing. You are not doing badly, Sarah said. But yes, I think this system will help you see patterns better, know when to sell and when to hold. Daniel would have appreciated this, Kenneth said. He always worried I would run the place into the ground with my poor record keeping. Tell me about him, Sarah said gently, if you want to. Kenneth was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. He was younger than me by 3 years, always laughing, always seeing the good in things. When our parents died in a fire back in Missouri, Daniel was the one who kept us going. Said we should come west, start fresh where nobody knew us as the charity case orphans. You were orphans, since I was 17 and he was 14. We worked odd jobs, saved every penny. Finally had enough to come west when I turned 21. Best decision we ever made. His voice grew rough. He should still be here. I am sorry he is not, Sarah said, but I think he would be glad you are not alone anymore. Kenneth looked at her then, really looked at her, and Sarah felt that look all the way through her body. I think he would have liked you very much. You have that same practical kindness he had. You see what needs doing and you do it, but you are gentle about it. Is that another way of saying I am sensible? Sarah asked, trying to lighten the moment even as her heart raced. A slow smile crossed Kenneth's face, transforming his features into something almost boyish. "Maybe, but I am learning sensible is not the same as boring. You have a quiet strength about you, Sarah. I admire that." Sunday morning dawned clear and beautiful. Margaret arrived early to help Sarah dress, bringing a crown of wildflowers she had woven for Sarah's hair. Sarah wore her best dress, a soft gray cotton with white lace at the collar and cuffs. It was not fancy, but it was pretty, and with the flowers in her hair and her spectacles cleaned until they sparkled, she felt almost beautiful. "You look lovely," Margaret assured her. "Kenneth will not be able to take his eyes off you." The church in Watsonville was small and whitewashed, with simple wooden pews and windows that let in the morning light. A handful of people had gathered, neighbors and friends Kenneth had invited. Tommy stood up front with Kenneth, serving as best man while Margaret stood with Sarah. Kenneth wore a new shirt, crisp and white, with a string tie and his best trousers. His dark hair was neatly combed, his jaw freshly shaved. When Sarah walked down the short aisle toward him, his expression was one of such open appreciation that she felt her cheeks warm. Pastor Donnelly was an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He spoke about partnership and commitment, about building a life together through both challenges and joys. When the time came for vows, Kenneth took Sarah's hands in his, and she was surprised to feel them trembling slightly. "I, Kenneth Edwards, take you, Sarah Mitchell, to be my wife," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I promise to honor you, respect you, and stand beside you through whatever comes. I will work to build a home with you, a family, a life worth living." Sarah's own voice shook as she repeated her vows, promising to be a true partner, to support and care for him, to make a home and a future together. When Pastor Donnelly pronounced them married and told Kenneth he could kiss his bride, Sarah's heart felt like it might beat right out of her chest. Kenneth leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted. But Sarah did not want to pull back. She tilted her face up, and his lips met hers in a kiss that was tender and careful and full of promise. It was Sarah's first kiss, and though it was brief, it left her breathless and wanting more. The small congregation applauded, and suddenly, Sarah was being hugged and congratulated by people she barely knew but who seemed genuinely happy for them. A neighbor woman named Mrs. Howell had prepared a small wedding breakfast at her home, and the celebration moved there, with food and laughter and toasts to the new couple's happiness. Kenneth stayed close to Sarah's side throughout, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back or holding her hand. The touch was possessive in a way that made Sarah feel claimed and protected rather than owned. She liked it, liked the solid warmth of him beside her, liked the way he introduced her as my wife, with unmistakable pride in his voice. When they finally returned to the ranch in the late afternoon, the reality of what came next hung between them. They were married now, truly married, which meant sharing not just a home but a bed. Kenneth helped Sarah down from the wagon, and they stood together in front of the house. The sun was beginning to lower, painting everything in golden light. "Are you nervous?" Kenneth asked quietly. "Yes," Sarah admitted. "Are you?" "Yes," he said, and the honesty made her smile. "I have never," Sarah began, then felt her courage fail. "I know," Kenneth said gently. "Neither have I, not really. I mean, there was a woman once, but it was not like this. This matters." The confession eased something in Sarah's chest. "What do we do?" "I think we figure it out together," Kenneth said. He took her hand and led her inside the house, their house now. In the bedroom, afternoon light streamed through the window, making everything warm and golden. Kenneth closed the door and turned to face Sarah. "We can take our time," he said. "There is no rush." But Sarah found she did not want to take time, did not want to prolong the nervous anticipation. She reached up and carefully removed her spectacles, setting them on the bedside table. The world went soft and blurred, but she could still see Kenneth's shape, could feel his presence. "I want to see you clearly for this," Kenneth said softly. He retrieved her spectacles and gently settled them back on her nose. "All of you." Then he kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, and Sarah felt heat bloom through her entire body. His hands came up to frame her face, and she rested her palms against his chest, feeling his heart hammering as fast as her own. They undressed slowly, helping each other with buttons and laces, pausing for kisses and whispered reassurances. When they finally came together in the bed, it was awkward at first, fumbling and uncertain. But they learned each other through gentle exploration, through quiet questions and honest answers, through patience and care. It hurt a bit for Sarah, but Kenneth was tender, stopping when she needed him to, moving slowly until the discomfort faded into something else, something that built and built until she cried out his name in wonder. Afterward they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Are you all right?" Kenneth asked, his voice rough. "I am more than all right," Sarah said honestly. "I am happy." She felt his chest rise and fall with a deep breath. "So am I. Happier than I have been in a very long time." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and when Sarah woke in the deep night, she felt a profound sense of rightness. This man, this place, this life. It was where she was meant to be. The weeks that followed established the rhythm of their married life. Sarah threw herself into making the house a home, sewing curtains for the windows, planting a vegetable garden near the kitchen, organizing and improving wherever she could. She took over all the bookkeeping for the ranch, and her careful records began to show patterns that helped Kenneth make better decisions about when to buy and sell cattle. Kenneth worked long days but always came in for meals, and they talked about everything and nothing while they ate. He told her stories about building the ranch, about learning to cowboy, about the challenges of running cattle in California's sometimes unpredictable climate. She told him about her childhood, about her love of reading, about the pain of watching her father gamble away everything her mother had worked to build. At night, they explored the growing passion between them, learning what brought each other pleasure, building an intimacy that went beyond the physical. Kenneth was an attentive lover, always making sure Sarah found her release before taking his own, and she discovered she had a passionate nature she had never suspected. But it was the small moments Sarah treasured most. The way Kenneth brought her wildflowers he found while checking fences. The way he listened intently when she read aloud in the evenings, his head in her lap while she ran her fingers through his hair. The way he looked at her across the table, like she was exactly what he had been waiting for his whole life. Margaret became a close friend, visiting often and inviting Sarah to social events in town. There were church socials and sewing circles, and Sarah gradually became part of the community. The women welcomed her warmly, and she found herself settling into life in Watsonville with surprising ease. 2 months into their marriage, Sarah woke one morning feeling queasy. She barely made it outside before losing the contents of her stomach. Margaret, who had stayed overnight after a late visit, found her sitting on the porch steps looking pale and shaken. "Oh my," Margaret said with a knowing smile, "I think I know what this means." "I think I do too," Sarah said, placing a hand on her still flat stomach, "but it seems so soon." "These things happen when they happen," Margaret said practically. "How do you feel about it?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Scared," she admitted, "but also happy. We have talked about children. Kenneth wants a family, and I want to give him that," Sarah said. "I want to fill this house with love and laughter. I want to build something lasting." When she told Kenneth that evening, he stared at her for a long moment, then swept her into his arms with a whoop of joy that startled her into laughter. "A baby," he breathed, setting her down but keeping his hands on her waist. "Our baby. Sarah, are you happy about this?" "I am," she said, and realized it was completely true. "Are you?" "I am terrified and thrilled in equal measure," Kenneth said honestly. "But yes, I am happy. So happy." He kissed her then, tender and sweet, and Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. This man, this good man, had given her everything she had never dared to hope for. A home, respect, partnership, passion, and now a child. She had arrived in Watsonville with nothing but desperation and fading hope, and she had found a life beyond her wildest dreams. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Sarah suffered from morning sickness for the first few months. Kenneth was attentive to the point of being overprotective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work. Sarah had to finally put her foot down when he suggested she stop cooking because standing at the stove might tire her. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she said firmly. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time while still doing their work. I will be fine." "I just want to take care of you," Kenneth said, looking abashed. "You do take care of me," Sarah assured him. "But you cannot wrap me in cotton wool for 9 months. I will go mad." Margaret laughed when Sarah recounted the conversation. "Tommy was the same way when I was expecting." "Men get so worried. Just wait until you are actually in labor. He will likely pace a hole clear through to China." "You are expecting?" Sarah asked, delighted. Margaret patted her own slightly rounded belly. 3 months along. I was waiting to be sure before telling anyone." "Our babies will be close in age." The two women embraced, both laughing and crying at the same time. It felt like a gift to have a friend going through the same experience, to not be alone in this new adventure. As Sarah's belly grew, Kenneth would talk to it at night, his hand spread over the swell, telling their child about the ranch and the life they would have. Sarah would run her fingers through his hair and feel such love for this man that it almost hurt. "You want a son or a daughter?" she asked one night. "I just want healthy," Kenneth said. "But if I am honest, a son would be good. Someone to teach the ranch to carry on what Daniel and I started. And if it is a daughter, then I will have 2 beautiful women to spoil," Kenneth said, kissing her belly. "Either way, I will be grateful." Winter came to the valley, bringing rain and cold winds. The cattle had to be moved to lower pastures, and Kenneth and Tommy worked long hours ensuring everything was secure. Sarah spent her days keeping the house warm and comfortable, cooking hearty meals, and working on baby clothes. She had transformed Daniel's old room into a nursery, sewing curtains with cheerful yellow fabric, and preparing a cradle Kenneth had built with his own hands. It was beautiful work, smooth and sturdy, with Sarah's initials and Kenneth's carved into the headboard along with the year. 1882. Margaret gave birth in late January to a healthy baby girl named Lucy. Sarah visited as soon as she could, holding the tiny bundle and marveling at the perfection of her little fingers and toes. In 2 months, she would have her own baby to hold, but nature had other plans. Sarah went into labor on a stormy night in late February, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Kenneth had been checking on a sick cow in the barn when Sarah's water broke, and Margaret, who had been visiting, sent Tommy to fetch him in a panic. "It is too early," Sarah gasped, gripping Margaret's hand as a contraction seized her. "Babies come when they are ready," Margaret said firmly, though Sarah could see worry in her eyes. "You are going to be fine. Kenneth is sending Tommy for the doctor." But the doctor was 20 miles away in San Jose, attending another birth, and the storm made travel treacherous. It became clear that Margaret would have to help deliver the baby herself, with Kenneth's assistance. Kenneth was pale but steady as he helped Sarah through each contraction, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, whispering encouragement. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the gray morning. Sarah was exhausted, certain she could not push any more when Margaret said sharply, "One more, Sarah. Give me one more big push." Sarah bore down with the last of her strength, and suddenly there was a release of pressure and then a sound. A thin, reedy cry that was the most beautiful thing Sarah had ever heard. "A boy," Margaret said, laughing and crying at the same time. "You have a son." She placed the baby on Sarah's chest, and Sarah looked down at the tiny red face, the small fists waving in protest at being thrust into the cold world. He was perfect. Small, but perfect. Kenneth was crying, tears streaming down his face as he touched their son's head with one trembling finger. "He is so tiny." "He will grow," Margaret assured them. "He came early, but he is breathing well, crying strong. Those are good signs." They named him Daniel Kenneth Edwards after his uncle and father. Little Daniel proved to be a fighter, nursing eagerly despite his small size, growing stronger each day. Kenneth was besotted, spending hours just watching his son sleep, marveling at every small sound and movement. "I never knew," he said to Sarah one night as they lay in bed with Daniel sleeping in his cradle nearby. "I never knew I could love like this, first you, now him. My heart feels too full." "I know exactly what you mean," Sarah whispered, reaching for his hand in the darkness. The years that followed were full of the ordinary joys and challenges of ranch life. Daniel grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's gray-blue eyes and his mother's serious demeanor. He toddled after Kenneth whenever allowed, insisting he was big enough to help with the cattle, sitting in front of his father on the saddle with an expression of pure bliss. When Daniel was 2, Sarah gave birth to a daughter they named Emma Grace. She had Sarah's dark hair and Kenneth's smile, and she was a sunny-natured child who laughed at everything. 2 years after Emma came another son, James, who was quieter than his siblings, but had a gift with animals that amazed everyone. The ranch prospered under Kenneth and Sarah's joint management. Her careful bookkeeping and his hard work combined to create steady growth. They bought more land, expanded their herd, hired additional help. What had been Daniel and Kenneth's dream became a family legacy. Tommy and Margaret had 3 more children after Lucy, and the 2 families spent holidays and birthdays together, their children growing up as close as cousins. The community that had welcomed Sarah when she first arrived became a true home, full of people she cared about and who cared for her in return. Sarah's spectacles remained a constant, though she went through several pairs over the years as her vision changed. But Kenneth never stopped telling her how much he liked them, how they framed her beautiful eyes, how he saw her clearly and loved everything he saw. On their 10th anniversary, Kenneth took Sarah on a picnic to a spot on the ranch where wildflowers grew thick in the spring. It was where he had first brought her to see the full extent of their land, where he had kissed her for the first time as man and wife outside the church. "You remember?" he asked, spreading a blanket under an old oak tree. "I remember everything," Sarah said, settling beside him and accepting the glass of lemonade he offered. "I remember being terrified and hopeful in equal measure. I remember thinking you were the most handsome man I had ever seen." "You thought I was handsome?" Kenneth asked with a grin. "You never said." "I was trying to be proper," Sarah teased. "Besides, you called me sensible." "You are sensible," Kenneth said. "You are also beautiful, passionate, strong, kind, and the best thing that ever happened to me." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I never gave you a proper engagement ring. I would like to remedy that." Inside the box was a simple gold band with a small diamond. It was not extravagant, but it was lovely, and Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "Kenneth, we should be saving money for the children's future." "We have plenty saved," Kenneth said firmly, "and you deserve something beautiful, something that shows the world how much I value you." He slipped the ring onto her finger above her plain wedding band. 10 years, Sarah. Here is to 50 more." 50 more, Sarah agreed, kissing him as the afternoon sun filtered through the oak leaves above them. Their children grew, each finding their own path. Daniel became a skilled cattleman like his father, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day ranch operations. Emma, surprising everyone, developed a passion for horses and became known throughout the valley for her ability to train even the most difficult animals. James, true to his gentle nature, became a veterinarian, studying in San Francisco before returning home to practice. Each of their children married for love, building their own families while staying close to the ranch. The house Kenneth and Sarah had built together became the heart of a sprawling family, with grandchildren running through the rooms, filling the air with laughter and noise. Sarah never stopped being grateful for the spectacles that had once made her feel self-conscious. They had been part of her appearance when Kenneth first saw her on that train platform, part of what he had seen clearly and chosen to love. They had become a symbol of how he had always seen the real her, without filters or illusions, and loved her anyway. Loved her because of who she truly was, not despite it. On their 50th anniversary, the family threw a massive celebration. Children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren gathered at the ranch. The house had been expanded over the years to accommodate the growing family, but the original structure remained at its heart. Kenneth and Sarah stood on the porch, surveying the crowd of people who had come from their union, and Sarah felt overwhelmed with joy. This life, this family, this love. It had all started with a desperate journey west and a man who had seen her clearly from the very first moment. Regrets? Kenneth asked, his arm around her waist. They were both in their 70s now, his hair silver and her own steel gray, but he still looked at her the way he had on their wedding day. "Not a single one," Sarah said firmly. "You? Only that I did not meet you sooner," Kenneth said. "But then again, maybe we met exactly when we were supposed to. Maybe everything that came before was just leading us to that train platform." "I like that thought," Sarah said. She leaned against him, comfortable in the embrace of a man who had been her partner, her lover, her best friend for 5 decades. "I was so scared that day." "So was I," Kenneth admitted. "Scared you would take one look at me and get back on the train. Scared I would not know what to say, how to make you want to stay." "And then you said you saw me clearly," Sarah remembered. "No one had ever really seen me before that, Kenneth. Everyone looked at the spectacles or the plain face or the circumstances, but you looked at me." "I saw a woman with kind eyes and a shy smile," Kenneth said. "I saw strength and intelligence and grace. I saw my future if I was lucky enough to deserve it." "We were both lucky," Sarah said. "Lucky to find each other, lucky to build this life." As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, their family gathered for a photograph. Kenneth and Sarah sat in the center, surrounded by the legacy of their love. The photographer, a young man from town with a new-fangled camera, called for everyone to smile. And Sarah did smile, the same shy smile she had given Kenneth 50 years ago on a train platform. Only now it was not shy from uncertainty, but from the overwhelming fullness of a life well lived, a love well tended, a family well raised. Kenneth squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back, and in that moment, everything that had ever mattered passed between them without need for words. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and the grandchildren were settled in various rooms throughout the house, Kenneth and Sarah lay in their bed, the same bed where they had loved and fought and reconciled and created life together for half a century. "I am tired," Sarah admitted. "But it is a good tired." "It was a perfect day," Kenneth agreed, "though every day with you has been perfect in its own way." "Even the hard days?" Sarah asked. "The year we lost half the herd to disease, when Emma broke her arm. When Daniel ran away for 3 days because he was angry about something I cannot even remember now, even those days," Kenneth said. "Because we faced them together. That is what marriage is, Sarah. It is not just the good times. It is choosing each other through everything, building something so strong that it can weather any storm." "We built something good," Sarah said softly. "We built something magnificent," Kenneth corrected. "Look at our family. Look at this ranch. Look at the life we created from nothing but hope and hard work." Sarah turned to face him, her hand coming up to touch his weathered cheek. Even in the dim lamplight, she could see him clearly, the face she had memorized over 50 years, more precious to her than any treasure. "I love you," she said simply. "I have loved you since you saw me clearly that first day, and I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Kenneth replied, his voice rough with emotion. "You were the answer to every question I did not know how to ask. You made me whole." They fell asleep like that, facing each other, hands clasped between them. And when morning came, they woke to the sound of their great-grandchildren playing in the yard below their window. The years continued to pass, as years do. Kenneth eventually needed a cane, and Sarah's hands grew gnarled with arthritis, making the fine needlework she once loved difficult. But they adapted, as they always had, finding new ways to contribute, new joys to celebrate. When Kenneth fell ill in his 78th year, the whole family rallied around. Sarah never left his side, sleeping in a chair beside his bed, holding his hand through the long nights. The doctor said his heart was simply wearing out, that he had lived a long, full life and his body was ready to rest. "I am not ready," Sarah told him fiercely one night when they were alone. "I am not ready to lose you." "You will never lose me," Kenneth said, his voice weak but clear. "I am in every corner of this ranch, every memory in this house. I am in our children and their children. I am in the life we built together. You will never be without me, Sarah." "It is not the same," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "No," he agreed, "but it is something. And you are strong enough to bear this. You are the strongest person I have ever known." He died 3 days later with Sarah holding his hand and their children gathered around. His last words were, "I see you clearly, my love." And then he was gone. Sarah grieved deeply but not hopelessly. She knew Kenneth would hate for her to give up on life, so she kept going. She spent her days with her family, teaching her grandchildren to cook and keep records, telling stories about Kenneth and Daniel and the early days of the ranch. She became the matriarch everyone came to for advice and comfort, the keeper of family history and wisdom. She lived to be 84 years old, sharp-minded and opinionated to the very end. When she knew her time was coming, she asked to be moved to the porch so she could see the valley one last time. Daniel, her eldest son, held her hand while her other children and many of her grandchildren gathered around. "This is a good life," she said, her voice thin but content. "I came here with nothing and I found everything. Take care of each other. Take care of this land. Remember that love is what matters most. Everything else is just details." She closed her eyes with a smile on her face, and when she took her last breath, those around her swore they heard her whisper, "I see you clearly too, my love." They buried her beside Kenneth on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under the shade of an old oak tree. The entire community came to pay respects to a woman who had arrived as a nervous mail-order bride and became a pillar of the valley, beloved by all who knew her. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, always kept in the Edwards name. Each generation told the story of Kenneth and Sarah, of how they met on a train platform and built an empire of love and family from nothing but hope and hard work. In the house, in a place of honor, sat a photograph taken on their 50th anniversary. Kenneth and Sarah in the center, surrounded by their legacy, both smiling. And if you looked closely at Sarah's face, you could see the wire-rimmed spectacles she wore proudly, the same spectacles that had been part of her appearance when Kenneth first said those fateful words, "I see you clearly." It became a family saying, passed down through the years. When a baby was born, when someone graduated or married or accomplished something significant, the family would say, "We see you clearly." It was an acknowledgement, a blessing, a reminder that true sight goes beyond surface appearances to the heart of who someone really is. The ranch still stands today, though it is now run by Kenneth and Sarah's great-great-grandchildren. The original house has been preserved, turned into a museum of sorts, showing how families lived in California in the late 1800s. Visitors come from all over to see it, to hear the story of the mail-order bride who wore spectacles and the cowboy who saw her clearly. But the real legacy is not in the house or the land or the historical significance. It is in the family that continues to thrive, generation after generation, built on the foundation of a love that started with honesty and grew into something magnificent. It is in the lesson that Sarah and Kenneth taught through their lives, that when you truly see someone without judgment or prejudice, when you love them for exactly who they are, you can build something that lasts forever. Their story became a legend in Watsonville, told and retold until it took on almost mythical proportions. But those who knew the truth understood that the real story was far better than any legend could be. It was the story of two ordinary people who found each other when they both needed finding, who built an extraordinary life from ordinary ingredients: hard work, honesty, respect, and love. In the family Bible that sits in a display case in the Ranch House Museum, you can still see the entries written in Sarah's careful hand. Births and deaths, marriages and milestones, all recorded with precision and love. The first entry, written in June of 1882, reads simply, "Kenneth Edwards married Sarah Mitchell today. We begin our life together with hope and faith. May God bless this union and the family we will build. He sees me clearly, and I am blessed beyond measure." And in the margin, added much later in a shaky hand, are the words, "57 years of joy, worth every moment, waiting to see him clearly again." The sun sets over the Watsonville Valley, much as it did over 140 years ago, painting the hills in gold and casting long shadows across the land. The cattle still graze in the pastures, the stream still runs clear and cold, and the oak tree on the hillside still provides shade for two headstones that stand side by side. On those headstones, beneath the names and dates, are simple inscriptions. On Kenneth's, "He saw clearly and loved well." On Sarah's, "She was seen clearly and loved completely." And that, in the end, was all that really mattered, not the success of the ranch or the size of the family or the prosperity they achieved. What mattered was that two people found each other across the distance and circumstance, saw each other truly, and chose to build a life together. Sarah had stepped off that train in 1882 with fear and hope warring in her heart, her spectacles perched on her nose and her future completely uncertain. And Kenneth had looked at her, really looked at her, and seen not a desperate woman with poor eyesight and limited prospects, but a partner, a companion, a woman worthy of love and respect. "I see you clearly," he had said, and those 4 simple words had changed everything. That is how a love story begins. Not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with the simple act of truly seeing another person and choosing to love what you see. Kenneth and Sarah understood that, lived it, and passed it down through their children and their children's children. The story of the mail-order bride who wore spectacles and the cowboy who saw her clearly became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of love to transform lives, to build futures, to create legacy. It showed that circumstances of how you meet matter far less than what you build together afterward. As the stars come out over the valley and lights flicker on in the ranch house, where the latest generation of Edwards' children sleep safe and warm, the spirit of that love story continues. It lives in every kindness exchanged, every challenge faced together, every moment of truly seeing and being seen by another person. Sarah had been right when she whispered her last words. Love was what mattered most. Everything else was just details. And the love she and Kenneth built together still echoes through the valley. A reminder that the best stories are not the ones about perfect people, but about imperfect people who choose each other perfectly. The end.